Um, Dr. Deubel holds her Ph.D. from the University of Arizona in Cultural Anthropology with a minor in Near Eastern Studies. Has conducted field research with Muslim communities in Morocco, I'm going to butcher this name, Mauritania, Mali, and Algeria, as well as other parts of West Africa. Please help me to welcome Dr. Deubel.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for inviting me today to participate, and it's great to see such a good turnout. I wanted to speak today just really briefly about one of the Muslim communities that I've worked with in North Africa during my research in anthropology. I lived for about a year and a half in different parts of North Africa, and I worked with a group called the Sahrawi Arabs, and I thought it would be interesting to speak about the role of the women in that culture today, because they play a really strong role in the social life and the political struggle that the Sahrawis have been going through. So I'll just tell you a little bit about it, and then later on, if you have questions, as was mentioned in the introduction. I also have experience working with Muslim communities in West Africa, in countries like Mali and Niger too. So this map, oops, if somebody could just, yeah, there you go. So this map here shows basically what's happening in this conflict that I've been studying in my research. It's going on between the country of Morocco in North Africa and the disputed territory to the south of Morocco that's called Western Sahara. But Morocco is currently controlling that territory, and it's under Moroccan rule at the present time. But there's an active resistant movement, and the indigenous population of the Western Sahara, which are Sahrawi Arabs, which means Arabs from the Sahara region, because it's in the Sahara Desert area, have been seeking independence. So it's one of the only territories left in the world that still has not been completely decolonized. It was originally a colony of Spain, whereas the rest of Morocco was a colony of France. And so on the map you can see the whole purple area is the Western Sahara, and then just across the border in Algeria, where there's a tan area, there's refugee camps where Sahrawi Arabs left in 1975. They fled when Morocco invaded to take over the Western Sahara, and about 155,000 people have been living in those camps outside the city of Tindouf in Algeria up to the present day. So I spent time in all of those different areas where the Sahrawis are living in Morocco and in a couple cities in the Western Sahara, and then I went over to the refugee camps for about a month. And that was in 2006 and 2007 when I was doing research. So I won't go too much into the history because it's a fairly long explanation, but this just gives you some of the key dates. So after Spain left that territory, as I mentioned, it was annexed by the Moroccan government, and the refugee crisis began because people that did not want to be under the Moroccan rule fled, and they received refuge by the Algerian government to live in the camps there. And so what makes their situation really unique as far as refugees go is that they actually declared a nation in exile within the refugee camps, and they named it the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. And it has its own fully functioning government, although it's not recognized by all the other states that exist in the world at this time. So, for example, the United States doesn't recognize that as an official country, but it is a declared nation. So since 1991, there hasn't been a state of violent warfare going on between the two sides. It's been a constant negotiation under the United Nations to try to broker a peace deal that's still discussed every year, presently in the UN, up to today. So this just shows you a couple pictures to see how different the lifestyle is. The picture on the left is how people live in the Western Sahara that's fairly developed and more wealthy, versus the refugee camps in Algeria that's very impoverished, and as you can see, it's very arid and sandy. There's hardly any agriculture. All the water and food has to be shipped in from humanitarian agencies on the outside. So the lifestyles that people live on either side are drastically different. So one thing that I've been studying in my research is the role of women in this culture, and it goes, this is an old picture from 1945 showing a woman poet or a singer, because they have a very strong performance tradition. And you can see the style of dress they wear is called the melhafa, since you've been talking a lot about the hijab in this seminar series. So I think it's interesting to see how the women there dress. It's a long piece of cloth that's wrapped around the head and the body as well. So on to the next one. So this is a picture of a more updated contemporary performance that I've been looking at the role of women today that are still active in the public sphere as artists and singers, and that they're using their artistic talents and skills to promote political causes, such as increasing awareness about this Western Sahara situation and conflicts. So this is a picture of a famous singer on the left from the country of Mauritania, and then some of the local refugee women in the camps that I studied that were involved in a National Day celebration where they, again, used singing to get their message across. So these are just another couple of images of what life is like in the camps. Most families live in tents, and they are formerly nomadic people that were camel herders traditionally, so they're used to a transient lifestyle, but they're given tents by the Algerian government, and you can see the interior of the tent with two women and their young sons who are in the military of the government in exile. And most of my research was done in places like that, sitting with families and speaking with them. And during the time I spent living with families, I also wore the melhafa dress that you see the women here wearing. The women have a really important role in the camps, which is what I wanted to just emphasize today, because 80% of the refugees are women, since most of the men are involved in the military and are gone for significant parts of the year. And so the women have been in charge of everything related to camp life: the schools, the distribution of food, interacting with foreign international agencies that bring in humanitarian aid. And what's interesting is that over 90% of the women are literate in the camp. So it's a very highly educated population, and many of the women are they have roles as ministers and members of parliament in the government in those camps. So you can see, again, we're dispelling some common misconceptions. That one is that Muslim women don't participate to the same extent in certain other governments, and in this case we see that the women have such an active role, and even more so than some of the men in this society. And this is a picture of some of the women human rights activists, and they're holding pictures of disappeared sons and husbands who have been taken in different parts of the conflict with Morocco into life imprisonment, or some of them have disappeared without a trace, and they do a lot of these type of public protests in the camps as well. And so what I'm interested in looking at is just how they have played a role in shaping the state in these refugee camps, and how the women facilitate communication with their relatives who are on the other side of the conflict back in Morocco and in the Western Sahara, and try to maintain those ties despite the situation. And they also maintain linkages with international human rights groups like Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch that attempt to give more attention to this issue, which we don't hear a lot about this issue in the United States especially, which is why I wanted to just bring it to your attention today. So the women, again, they are very involved in the parliament. They act as diplomats. They have a national union of Sahrawi women, and they face many challenges. One is that they're often used in a sort of a symbolic role for the movement, and so they're highlighted both as being very strong-willed and, in some sense, politically active women, but in some cases the women that aren't able to play those roles don't get to express the difficulties that they're having just with daily life in the camps, like obtaining enough food and health care for their families. This, I just wanted to show you that it's interesting to see how many women have been elected into their parliament, and you can see in 2008 and again in 2012 just some of the numbers. It's decreased slightly from 18 to 13 women out of the total of 53 members of parliament, but you can see that they're playing a strong role in the government there. And finally, I just want to end on saying, you know, this is an ongoing conflict. It's been happening more than most of us in the room have been alive in some cases, so it's been going on now for several decades, and what's going to happen to these refugees, we don't know. There's increasing migration. Many of them are moving out of the camps because they're frustrated, they can't get jobs or have a future there, so they're moving into other areas like Mauritania, where they speak the same dialect of Arabic, or into Algeria or Spain. And the woman you see pictured here was recently honored with a Human Rights Award in the United States, and she's one of the most well-known activists to try to support the situation of the refugees and just let more people know that this is still going on, and Morocco continues to push for keeping that territory, and the resistance movement continues to push to declare it as an independent state. So it's just something to watch for when you're looking at the news about things happening with the Arab Spring and the current situation in Mali, because it's a very volatile and important geopolitical zone in the world right now, as you know, and just, you know, keep an eye out for what's happening with this situation as well. So, thank you.